we lied a lot to the public. Government was lying. I suspected that we were lying, but I wasn't too sure. You see, when people tell you, because I was reporting the meetings, when they told us President Yaradua was playing with his children, the stories were not adding up. But when I confirmed that we were being fed with lies.
So at that time, you were not having access to the president?
No. Nobody had access to him once he was flown abroad. Nobody had access. The Cabal took over. They were in charge of everything. It was all the president said, Mr. President said. Even when you knew they were lying, you could not be too sure. But when I confirmed that they were lying and confirmed that the president was not in a position to give instructions or sign anything, was when they went to get him sign, was it the bill, National Assembly bill? And when they came back, I started asking questions. You see, when three people say three different things, then you know that they did not come together to agree on a common lie to tell. One of them said that they stayed in another town and sent the National Assembly document for the president to sign. One of them said, the same person told me, one person said he was downstairs and sent it up for him to sign. And another person told me that he went and saw him, and the ADC and the CSO did not allow him to talk with him, and they gave it to him to sign.
Consistency.
So there was inconsistency, and I concluded that we were being fed with lies, and I was consequently feeding the public with lies. I got disturbed. I got so disturbed that I was not able to sleep anymore.
What if I told you that Nigeria almost lost her democracy? Not to war, not to a coup, but to silence, deception, and a powerful inner circle determined to seize control. What if the truth about a president's condition was hidden from the entire nation, just so a few men could cling to power? And what if one woman, calm, confident, fearless, and unshaken, stood up against them all? This is the untold story of the courage in the face of conspiracy. This is the story of our dear sister, Professor Dora Akunyili. In one of the most tense and controversial moments in Nigeria's political history, a battle was quietly unfolding behind closed doors. At the center of it stood Dora Akunyili, a woman known for her integrity, now facing the most dangerous fight of her life, not against fake drugs, but against powerful forces within the government itself. As rumors spread, confusion grew, and the nation was left in the dark. A small but influential group, often referred to as the Cabal, allegedly worked tirelessly to suppress the truth about the sitting president's condition. Their goal? To hold on to power at all costs. But then came a moment that redefined history and changed everything. A moment where silence could no longer be tolerated. A moment where one voice broke through fear and altered the course of Nigeria's democracy forever. At the center of this turning point was Dora Akunyili. What really happened? And how did Dora Akunyili challenge the system?
Professor, you recently bagged an African award awarded to you in Niger Republic, together with other distinguished African women, for your leadership in NAFDAC and helping to stabilize democracy in Nigeria. Now, this award is coming 4.5 years after you left office. What reflections did that give you?
Well, it actually made me feel that that comfort that when you work with all your heart, with all your might, and putting your best in any situation, people don't forget. Not only in Nigeria, universally. I was actually pleasantly surprised. 4.5 years after NAFDAC and 2.5 years or more after the Ministry of Information. And people are still calling me, not just in Nigeria, but outside Nigeria, to recognize the work we did. I feel honestly very grateful to God and to the good people of Niger Republic, especially the wife of their president who sponsored that award, the president who was totally in support. There was a word they used for it, and then the organizers and their Ministry of Women Affairs that worked with their First Lady.
Part of the reason for that award was your courage at a critical time of Nigeria. We'll be discussing that in a moment. But obviously, your profile in NAFDAC facilitated your choice into the federal cabinet. How did it happen, considering that you are not a politician?
Well, when I was in NAFDAC, my acceptability in the country became legendary because people appreciated, they still appreciate what we did. And because of that, President Obasanjo announced that I announced me as the mobilizer of something like that, of Yar'Adua's campaign. And I didn't like the position because I felt my hands were full in NAFDAC. But because I needed to obey constituted authority and the man that put down his feet to employ me as DG NAFDAC, I joined the campaign as the director of mobilization. So that was actually my first time into going into parties and politics. But going into public service was from when I went into local government position. We can go back to that.
I wanted to know how you got to become a minister.
How I got to become a minister. So after the campaign, the president was sworn in, and when he reshuffled, he made me Minister of Information and Communications. And that was announced after all the oath taking and all the ceremonies. I didn't really expect to be Minister of Information because it's information for me is like 180 degrees away from me. I wanted a critical ministry where I could go and achieve X in 6 months, X in another 3 months, and so on. I'm not saying that
you are not the only person that was surprised.
Yes.
How come you were given the ministry portfolio?
From what President Yar'Adua told me, may he so rest in peace, we had image problem, and I was suited in that position to handle information at a time when government was not actually too acceptable to the people. So my acceptability to the people became an asset for government. So that was why I was put in that position. I felt very bad. I must tell you that. And it would have been difficult for me to accept it if I was told earlier. But you know, in Nigeria, it's after the swearing in and everything that this is announced. But I quickly reminded myself with my daughter and the mother-in-law that came to support me and my husband that this is the soul and this information is the soul and image of Nigeria, and I can still be there and make the best out of it. I know that wherever I found myself, I would try to turn around the place, and I encouraged myself. Again, I remembered something that happened 6 months before that appointment. My elder sister had a dream that I was made Minister of Information, and I told her she had malaria, that she should go and buy Coartem, because there was no way in this world I could be made Minister of Information. So that dream is called by malaria hallucination. So
it didn't occur to you that your profile now as somebody that Nigerians respect would be used to kind of mobilize Nigeria?
It didn't occur to me at all. But when I remembered my elder sister's dream, I said, wow, nothing happens without God's approval. So I swung into action. Most of the journalists, most of you didn't want me. You said I was not part of you. And they abused me all over the place, but I didn't listen. I just continued as if nothing was happening. Such that by the time I finished that first part, and when I was reappointed, before I was reappointed, the same journalists that were saying they didn't want me because I'm not a journalist, they were writing to say they wanted me back.
During your tenure as Information and Communications Minister, you brought many programs and slogans to shore up Nigeria's image abroad and ensure that Nigerians are patriotic. How would you assess these campaigns that you, good people,
great nation? I would say it's one of the best things that had ever happened to this country. because it was rebranding that was people-oriented. It was not government-oriented. And in fact, that rebranding is even more popular outside this country than in Nigeria.
How?
In Niger, they are excited about it. Nigerians, this is the first time Nigerians are coming out to say we are indeed good people and it's a great nation without making any pretense about it. And good people, great nation is still being used in some products. I feel so excited about it. And when you get into Heathrow, the big signboard you see, is it GT Bank? Nigeria, good people, great nation. Does it not lift your spirit when you see it? And I believe that that rebranding Nigeria campaign, by the grace of God, could still come back sometime in our lifetime. But even if it doesn't, it will continue to permeate into the system. For the fact that the slogan is still in use will tell you that it's an accepted slogan.
You know, Madam...
and if it was not about slogan, the slogan was just a driving force, remember?
Yes, you know, many a Nigerian critic say, but for the existence of the likes of the parastatals in the Ministry of Information, NTA, Voice of Nigeria, Radio Nigeria, NAN, that the ministry is kind of irrelevant. If not for this kind of intellectual direction, you, and I think to an extent Nweki Jr., tried to give it. Are you also in tune with this, that there is need to reform the Ministry of Information and its role generally?
But they are right. The critics are right. Ministry of Information needs re-engineering. Because if a ministry is not relevant, if a ministry is not speaking to the minds of people's needs, that ministry becomes irrelevant. And that was why I brought in the Rebranding Nigeria campaign, so that Ministry of Information would not just be a ministry of reading news and then reading news, kind of, and analyzing news. And I believe it needs re-engineering. I don't. If I tell you I know how else it can be done, then I will be lying. The only way I thought it could be done was through that rebranding, because if we had continued with rebranding, by now it would have gotten into the nerves and fabrics of this system, whereby people will start actually reassessing the way we assess ourselves. Reorientation, bringing up that spirit of patriotism and going back to bring up those beautiful cultural values and telling the world who we are, because most of the time people tell us who we are. People define ourselves for us instead of us defining ourselves to the world. It was catching on all over. Even in America, they were asking for right to produce our shirts of Nigeria, good people, great nation. Anyway, I believe that that Rebranding Nigerian project was a good program. That was why President Yar'Adua approved it. And I believe it caught on, and I believe it is still on in one way or the other. For the fact that people are still talking about it means that it's worth discussing and it was worth doing.
Professor, all your life, you had either been an academic or a technocrat, doing fine and enjoying life. What attracted you to politics?
I was an accidental politician, let me put it that way. I was a lecturer, and my dream was to become a renowned professor, to make some inventions in the area of drugs. I really wanted to be a world-renowned professor. I dreamt it. So I didn't want to have anything to do with politics. You can't mix wanting to be a renowned politician and professor and politics. My husband used to go to the village to treat patients, so I was going with him. So some weekends, when we visited the village, so a woman or a girl will run to us and say, doctor, me doctor's wife, if you had come last weekend, my child wouldn't have died. That kind of story. So it touched my spirit. I called my husband. I said, why don't you open a clinic so that you can be helping these people? My husband said, what? If you finish treating them, they will say, oh, thank you, Nwa Julius. Julius' son has treated us, and there's no way we should pay him. We know the father. There is our relation. So how would I train my children if I come to establish a clinic here? I would not make money. So I now started thinking of what to do for the people because there was no hospital there. So I decided to go to the women's meeting and talk to them about an abandoned old building. How do we refurbish this building and make it a hospital? Because people are dying here. They don't have hospital attention. And the women were excited about my proposal because I'm not from there. I'm married there. It's like this woman is not from here. She doesn't have any relation here. And she is so passionate about helping us. So they joined, they contributed money. We finished it. And I went to the men's meeting and pleaded with them to equip it. And what I used to get them was just equip at the theater or the ward or wherever and get your name affixed there and get immortalized, your name, your company, your family or whatever. In 45 minutes, they took up the hospitals. I went to the Onisha market with my husband and the donors, and the hospital was equipped. And Professor B.C. Mosu, the then commissioner for information, was called to help us. He donated some equipment. That was how we established a hospital in the village. And that was how I became a village champion. They now said, oh, this woman is our own. Oh, this woman should go to House of Rep. She should go to this. She should go to that. My husband said, no, you are not going anywhere. I don't like women politicians. You're too young for that. Anyway, I wasn't even tempted. I said, I want to be a professor. So I left after the establishment of that hospital. I said, I have finished my work. But thereafter, the opinion leaders led by Chief Dan Obuefi, they were asked to nominate somebody to represent them in the local government. They nominated me. That was how I started my political career. I went to the local government to represent them. They were asked 3 times to represent somebody that would, nominate somebody that would represent them in state boards. I was nominated 4 times. So that was how in the local government, I served in health management board. I served in advisory council, women commission. I was the coordinator of Better Life for Anambra State. So I found myself totally immersed in the system.
But
that was how I started.
A masterstroke of your political decision was when you retired as Minister of Information and Communication in a PDP government and sought elect position on the platform of an opposition party, AFGA. Was that a conscious choice or political strategy?
Well, I believed in what I did, and I still believe in what I did. I don't regret anything because nothing happens without God's approval. I was a Minister of Information, and my governor invited me and wanted me to come and help him to seek election and serve my people on a different and of course higher platform. Elective position is better than appointive position. I hope you know that, especially when your people elect you to serve them. So some people did not agree with me, but I believed in what I did. My husband believed in it. I went for the election. I actually won the election. I'm not in the Senate today because of the 180 days expiration of cases. If the case was concluded, I would have been in the Senate. But all the same, that I'm not in the Senate is the will of God.
Madam,
I am not complaining.
You are a very vibrant...
It is the will of God.
You are a very vibrant and vocal person in Nigeria's political landscape, well known to everybody. But are you still in politics? Do you still nurse political ambition? You've been quiet for some time now.
Oh, I'm very much in politics. I am very much in politics. I still nurse political ambition. And if it is the will of God, I will run again for the Senate.
But some people are saying that the people you fought in NAFDAC were the ones that fought you back.
Oh, they fought me back, but that was not why I lost. Even with all the money they put into that election to make sure that I did not get it, I still won. If I did not win, they should have allowed the case to be concluded on time so that the judges would count the votes from every polling booth and find out who had the majority votes. But yes, you're right. They contributed money, they helped, they did everything over their dead body. But it is not because of them. It is the will of God.
You were a major participant when Nigeria was kind of at a crossroads. Later, Adua was ill, and then we were neither here nor there before the Senate resolution. You came out, and it's now popular across Nigeria the so-called Cabal. Can you just give us an insight into that, and why did you decide to speak about it?
That was why, part of the reason why I was honored in Niger Republic. For the organizer called me heroine of democracy. And
part of the award you were
part
given
of the award.
In Niger.
There was a lot of emphasis on NAFDAC, but there was also a little emphasis on what happened during the last months of President Yar'Adua. May he so rest in peace. What happened during that period was that we lied a lot to the public. Government was lying. I suspected that we were lying, but I wasn't too sure. You see, when people tell you, because I was reporting the meetings, when they told us President Yar'Adua was playing with his children, the stories were not adding up. But when I confirmed that we were being fed with lies.
So at that time, you were not having access to the president?
No. Nobody had access to him once he was flown abroad. Nobody had access. The Cabal took over. They were in charge of everything. It was all the president said, Mr. President said. Even when you knew they were lying, you could not be too sure. But when I confirmed that they were lying and confirmed that the president was not in a position to give instructions or sign anything, was when they went to get him signed, was it the bill, National Assembly bill? And when they came back, I started asking questions. You see, when three people say three different things, then you know that they did not come together to agree on a common lie to tell. One of them said that they stayed in another town and sent the National Assembly document for the president to sign. One of them said, the same person told me, one person said he was downstairs and sent it up for him to sign. And another person told me that he went and saw him, and the ADC and the CSO did not allow him to talk with him, and they gave it to him to sign.
Consistency.
So there was inconsistency, and I concluded that we were being fed with lies, and I was consequently feeding the public with lies. I got disturbed. I got so disturbed that I was not able to sleep anymore. At a stage, I decided to travel. Took my leave for the first time, hoping that by the time I came back from my leave, these things would be sorted out. But by the time I came back, it was still on. That was when, after the last council meeting, when the former Attorney General took over my job. And my face gave me out because I was in shock. I was looking at him in shock. And you know, our journalists are fantastic. They took that photograph and showed it in front of one of the newspapers. How I was looking at him in shock as he was making that report. And I actually told everybody around me that that was the last day I would appear publicly to tell a story that I had confirmed that was a lie. And a day before that council, I had started thinking of what to do. But before that day before council, I went to 3 ministers. One of them, I went to his house because of his age. And when I came to his house, I saw Dr. Kalu Idike-Kalu. I called Dr. Kalu Idike-Kalu, the former Minister of Finance. I said, my brother, this is why I have come here. I would want you to join your voice to mine if you can. Our democracy is collapsing. I want to speak to this man. I've spoken to 2 ministers. They don't want to help. But I think for the age of this man, he's not looking for money. He's not looking for anything. You should be able to join me. I want some people to join me. I don't want to do it alone. Dr. Kalu Idike-Kalu was so excited. He said, go ahead. Whatever you do, I support you. I called the man, talked to him. He said he was not ready to join me in saying anything. I should just leave it. I called the minister out from the church immediately after a mass. I said, Honorable Minister, we have to do something. Our democracy is collapsing. People died over the years for us to get the democracy we are enjoying. If it collapses, those of us that feel that we have to keep our job, we still lose this job. The minister said I should just leave him. This thing is too delicate. If the man comes back, I called the minister, the third. That one said he was coming to my office. I said, listen, I want us to come together. He said, no, Yar'Adua did so much for me. I can't afford to fight him. I said, we are not fighting Yar'Adua. A man is ill. It is not a crime to be ill. It's just that we want the vice president to become acting president. The system is getting derailed. Look at the story. He cannot send troops to Jos. He cannot do this. He cannot sign this. That's why they told so many lies. Anyway, he said he was never going to join me in the process. So I decided to go solo. I wrote, after those 3 people, I stopped meeting anybody. After writing that memo, I called my SA, Mr. Bumba, to my house in the morning. I said, Ron. He said, what is going on? Are you not going to cancel? I said, you must be here before 8:30. He came, he read it. After reading it, he said, Mommy, this is suicidal. You can't do this. I said, why shouldn't I do it? If I die, I die. He said that our job is on the line. I said, if our democracy collapses, you will still lose your job. So I went and presented it that morning, and after I distributed the papers, some of them read it quickly. The secretary to government said, no, retrieve these papers. And you know, some people started abusing me. The highest voice was that of the attorney general, and it went on and on. I was so harassed that I forgot my council papers and box in that council chambers and left. I came back to collect them. Anyway, my husband was also upset when he heard it. He called me. I said, why did you do this? Why did you do this? You suffered too much in NAFDAC. You didn't do. And I said to my husband, yes, I didn't tell you. I'm sorry. Because I know that if I told you, you would not agree. If Abraham had told Sarah he was going to sacrifice Isaac, Sarah would not have allowed him leave the house. So it's like I had reply for everybody. And I have no regret. I know I am still suffering from that because too many people are still angry with me. But honestly speaking,
do you feel vindicated, kind of?
I feel vindicated because immediately after that memo issue, it triggered a spiral response from everywhere. National Assembly, these groups and that groups, and eventually our president became acting president, became president, and is still president. What is important is that our democracy was stabilized. And I was not out to fight President Yaradua. In fact, President Yaradua, if he saw me some meters away, even as a president, he would shout, my sister, how are my sister? So we were close enough. I was even closer to the wife. So it was not a personal fight. It was like I was Minister of Information. I found myself in an awkward position. I was the person that would relay the lies to the public. And I got to a point where I said I would no longer do that.
Madam.
And I was relieved after that memo. I was able to sleep again.
Yes. Looking at this action, how would you say people should approach public office? Should their loyalty be to the nation, or their loyalty and to their oath of office, or their loyalty to their so-called godfather or whoever?
You see, public service is a call. It's a call service in a special way. Especially in a population like ours, where you have millions of people and you're selected among the few to pilot the affairs of government. You should see it as sacred. Loyalty should be to your boss, yes, when he asks you to do what is correct. I can also be stubborn. If I'm asked to do what is wrong, I will not do it. But greater loyalty should be to the country, because it is to the country that you swore the day you were being sworn in. And it is loyalty to the country that will bring about common good for majority of our people. So I believe I had loyalty to my boss, but I had greater loyalty to the country. And that's what it should be.
Now, going back to your award in Niamey, at that event, you spoke about starting a foundation in respect of the fight against fake and adulterated drugs. Tell us more about it and what you will do different.
Yeah, I want to continue the fight against fake and counterfeit medicine, but in a different way. And I want to do it for life. And I also want whatever I will do to outlive me. I have started the process of Dora Akunyili Foundation for Safe Medicine, but I don't want to give out what it will be now so that the counterfeiters will not start fighting it. I want them to just see it, bam, and they will have nothing to do.
Now,
so I don't want to bring it out to the open now. Suffice it to say that it's in the process.
Now, what are we likely going to be hearing? Knowing that you are coming from Anambra,
Well, yes, I'm coming from Anambra.
And Abga.
Abga, we have issues here and there which are being sorted out by the grace of God. We are still family. We are still brothers and sisters. And by the grace of God, when these issues are sorted out, we are going to have convention, congresses, and our gubernatorial election. I'm not running for governor. Somebody else will run. Our governor, who is the leader of our party in Anambra State, has said the governor we should come from Anambra North, because Anambra North has never produced governor. You see, this zoning thing. And once the governor has spoken and generality of the people accepted it, there will be no need for anybody from the other two zones to come out. And besides, I've always been interested in the Senate, which I would want to go back to run. And at this time around, I'm not going to start rigging to outrig anybody, but I'm going to make sure that nobody is able to rig, and that our votes are protected. Because on the day of election, thugs run out of the state.
Are you going to Senate because you're not satisfied with what is going on there, or the number of women there, or what?
No, I don't ever think of being a woman. I'm going to Senate to serve my people in a special way. I'm going to Senate to be a voice for my people, a voice for the nation. I'm going to Senate to show that in being in the Senate, one can still do a lot of things differently. And I will withhold other things until the right time to talk about them. But I know that in the Senate, I will definitely make a difference.
I've been speaking with the patriotic and vibrant Professor Dora Akunyili, a professor of pharmacology, former Minister of Information, DG NAFDAC, a humanist, politician, and international activist who gave us insights into her continuing journey through life and service to democracy and humanity. Madam, thank you very much for coming on Late Edition.
Thank you.
That's Late Edition. I'm Ibrahim Ismaila.
What?